Today we will learn about the two generals problem and the Byzantine Generals problem. Let's say I have three spreadsheets that contains the results of students passing their bachelor degree from three different states. Each spreadsheet is represented by its own file. So let's say that file 1 represents the first spreadsheet, file 2 represents the second, file 3 represents the third. And each state has its own server represented by P1, P2, and P3. We want to know which student got the highest mark and across all states. And we want all states to announce it, which means all states need to agree and have consensus on which student got the highest mark. An easy algorithm to do this is to make each state compute the highest value in its own file or its own spreadsheet, and after that they should exchange these highest marks. So file 1 has a student that got the highest mark, and file 2 has its own student that got the highest mark, and so does file 3. Now we want to know which student among these three have the highest mark. So what we do, we exchange the values and easily select the highest across these like this. So P1 will send the value V1 to both P2 and P3. P3 will send V3 to P2 and P1, and so on. Now all processes have three values, V1, V2, and V3. Each process should have a simple function that takes three arguments and selects and returns the highest value, the biggest of these three. This sounds really easy, right? But as we have studied previously, each distributed system must have some timing assumptions and failure assumptions. For example, is my network synchronous or asynchronous? Or what faults could my simple algorithm tolerate? For example, what if the second server crashed? How could I retrieve the results then? Can my algorithm tolerate such faults? What if the third server is unable to send or receive messages, so it has an omission failure? Or even worse, what if the first server went rogue or it was controlled by some hackers? So we have Byzantine faults now. What if the first server sent faulty values? For example, it says that V1 has the biggest value while it has the smallest. Can my algorithm tolerate this? Well, obviously it can't for now, because my assumptions are really basic. So obviously I am assuming a synchronous network with no faults. But it appears that there is no such algorithm that can solve this problem if you have an asynchronous network. So consensus in asynchronous network is in fact impossible. And we will see why by understanding the two generals problem. Let's say we have two generals separated by a valley, general A and general B. Between this valley is a castle, and these two generals wants to coordinate an attack on this castle. But the attack would be successful only if both generals attack at the same time. If one general attack and the other does not, the attack would fail. The problem is that they communicate only by sending messages across this valley right here, which means messages could be captured by the castle, by the enemy castle. Which means even if the message is received successfully, they don't know whether that is the case or not. So the only way to know that your message was received is by a reply from the other general. But even the reply could be lost or captured by the enemy. So consider the following scenario. Let's say that General A sends a messenger and he wants to attack. He says, hey, let's attack. So even if the messenger managed to successfully maneuver the enemy castle and cross the valley successfully, and the message was received by General B. General A, so far, he has no clue whether his message was captured by the enemy castle or not. So the only way he would know whether his message was received is by waiting for a reply from the second general. So far, he cannot attack because remember, as we said, the only way the attack would be successful only if both generals would attack at the same time. And then the General B would send a reply saying, hey, I received your message and I really want to attack. So he has an acknowledgement, he sends an acknowledgement of his attack. So he sends a messenger, but again, this reply could be captured by the castle, by the enemy castle, or it could pass. So we have no idea whether our reply has been sent or not. So far, General B can't attack yet. So he needs a reply from General A. And then General A sends an acknowledgement of that acknowledgement. So he sends a reply to that reply. He says that I received your reply in order for them to attack. Again, he sends a messenger, so the message could be lost or captured by the enemy, so he cannot yet attack. So this general is still waiting for the other general that he sent a reply. Even if that reply has been sent, he still cannot attack yet because he is waiting for the other general to say that his reply has been received, and so on and so forth. So essentially, they cannot agree on the attack due to the problem that their messages could always be lost or captured. So there is always a dependency on these replies. So the reply for a reply for a reply or for a reply and so on and so forth. Because, as we said, the attack should be successful only if they attack at the same time. So it's not like General A sends, hey, I'm gonna attack after I received 5 replies or 6 replies. So they need to attack at the same time. And it is impossible. In distributed systems, the two generals problem illustrates the impossibility of reaching agreement between two parties if they communicate via an asynchronous network. The valley is the asynchronous network that can never guarantee anything about message delivery. So the message could be lost, it could be captured by someone, it could take years. Again, as we explained, asynchronous networks, they don't have any timing bound. So if you want to create a distributed system that relies on an asynchronous network, just know that it is guaranteed or impossible for you to have consensus inside that distributed system. What about consensus with Byzantine faults? Is it even possible? The Byzantine Generals problem illustrates the difficulties we can have when dealing with Byzantine faults. Suppose we have n number of generals. One general could be the leader and a number of lieutenants that wants to coordinate an attack on a city. However, this time it's not in a valley. Or in other words, the timing assumptions are that of a synchronous or partially synchronous network. And the attack would be successful only if a majority of the generals reach agreement on whether to attack or not. Not the time of the attack. This time, the time of the attack could be easily solved because we have synchronous or partially synchronous networks. The real problem is trying to reach a majority vote on whether to attack or retreat. It looks something similar to this, where we have loyal generals and traitors. In this case, traitors are represented by this helmet right here. But keep in mind that the problem is that from the perspective of each general, except traitors, They have no idea who is the traitor, which means generals can't trust each other. And a majority of votes between loyal generals need to be established on whether to attack or retreat. The other problem is that traitors could send conflicting messages to make the attack fail. They could send to some generals that they would attack and to others that they would retreat. So the real problem we are trying to solve is how can we know for sure that each vote received from any general would be the same sent for others? For example, if I am this loyal general right here and I get a vote of attack sent from this second loyal general, how could I know for sure that this is not a traitor that sent me the attack vote and sent to others retreat so he could make the consensus fail? The problem could be simplified even more by having a leader. This leader can give orders, and the loyal generals need to know whether the leader is a traitor or not. A simple solution is to ask the rest of the generals the order they received from the leader. But other generals could be traitors, and they could lie about the order they received from the leader. But we can also have the possibility that the leader is actually a traitor, so he could send conflicting messages as well. So who is lying? How could you know for sure? And how could we reach a majority of votes between loyal generals even if the leader could be malicious or a traitor? Let's take a look at a simple example with four generals. We have N1, N2, N3, and N4. N1, N2, and N3 are loyal generals, with N1 being the leader. N4 is the traitor. So N1 decides to send the order of attack. But so far, N2 and N3, they don't yet know who is the traitor and who is loyal. So they don't know whether N1 is a traitor or a loyal general. A good algorithm would be to exchange the order that they received from N1. So N2 would broadcast the order that he received from N1. So he sends the attack order from N1 to the rest of the generals. N3 does the same. But N4, in this case, a good attack would be to prevent one of these three from the attack. So what he tried to do is he tried to tell N3 to retreat, for example, or N2. He cannot directly send to N1 the retreat order because N1 actually sent the attack order. So he would obviously know that N4 is a traitor. So what he does is that he tells one of these two that I received the retreat order from N1. I didn't receive the attack order, so that two of these would decide to attack and one of them wouldn't, and the attack wouldn't succeed. It would be a failure. And so he sends attack to N1 and N2, and for N3 he says the retreat order, and it doesn't matter what they send to themselves. But in this time, he can't actually win. He cannot sabotage the consensus because eventually we will have a majority vote of attack, because N1 has 3 total votes for attack, N2 has 3 total votes for attack and 0 votes for retreat, N3 has 2 total votes of attack and 1 total vote of retreat, so he would decide to attack, obviously. And so N4 couldn't actually sabotage the consensus. But what if we have 5 generals with 2 traitors? So I am adding another traitor so that you can understand the requirements for us to have in order to tolerate Byzantine faults. So let's say we have 2 faulty generals or 2 traitors. And so they start the same algorithm, which is to broadcast what they have received from N1. So N2 and N3, which are loyal generals, they send the same attack they received from N1. And then what N4 and N5 does is that they try the same attack for N3 or N2. So they decide to send retreat order for N3. So what they are effectively saying is something like this. N4 and N5 are telling N3 that they received the retreat order from N1. In this case, N3 would be confused whether N1 sent the attack order or the retreat order. Who is he going to believe? Is he going to believe N1 or is he going to believe N4? If he decides to attack, it could be the case that N1 is the traitor and N2, it could be N1 and N2 are the traitors, and N4 and N5 are not traitors, they are loyal. And they indeed received the retreat order. Or it could be in this case, they are the traitors and they send the retreat order. So in this case, the default position is to do nothing. So you cannot go into attack. So what he does is the result of what would be attack for N1 because he has 4 total number of attacks, N2 the same, but N3 he cannot decide, so he will obviously retreat. So N1 he goes to the war, N2 does the same, he goes with N1, but N3 and N4 and N5 they don't go to the war, so the attack wouldn't be successful because we don't have the majority of the army attacking the castle. It appears that given some number of correct nodes, we can actually achieve consensus, even with Byzantine faults. So how many correct nodes do we need to tolerate Byzantine faults? We need 2 times the number of traitors plus another one. That will shift the vote. Given F faulty nodes, we need 2F plus 1 correct nodes. 2F plus 1 is just another way of saying more than 50% of the Byzantine nodes. So the total number of nodes would be the correct nodes plus the faulty nodes. That would give us 2F plus 1, which are the correct nodes, plus F, which is the faulty node. And that would give us 3F plus 1. So if I have one faulty node, I need 2 times 1 plus 1. So I would need 3 correct nodes, and I would need 3 times 1, which is 3, plus 1, which is 4 total nodes.